Hello!
What's up, guys?
Thanks for stopping by. Today we're going to talk about tiny house costs. Are they truly affordable or overhyped and overpriced? Let's discuss.
All right, let's do this.
And if you don't know us, I'm Alexis.
And I'm Christian, and we are Tiny House Expedition.
We built our own house and have been living and traveling in it for about 3.5 years. So if you've been following us, you know right now we're in North Carolina helping Christian's mom downsize.
Yep, so she's moving into a new house, and so we're getting this house ready to sell. Yep.
Yeah, and she's almost there.
Oh, so close.
So close.
Just a little bit more to paint.
Marie Kondo would be proud.
Yeah, she would.
All right, so if you're new to our channel, we share tiny house and travel inspiration, advocacy, and how-tos. And today we want to dig into tiny house costs. And as you probably know, tiny house costs vary greatly. There's a huge difference between a DIY and a professionally built house. And you hear people complain all the time, including at the tiny house festival we were just at in Georgia. The tiny house price keep raising.
And you know, it's so much that has to do with, you know, all of the parts and pieces that are inside of it. So you can have an astronomical tiny house if you really want to, but you don't have to.
And I think one thing is some builders that are staying in the game now may be raising their prices so they can sustain their business. Labor is expensive. And whether you're building 200 square feet or 2,000 square feet, there's still a certain base amount of labor that's going to go into it and materials. You know, you hear sometimes, who said this? Was it Jay Schaefer or Andrew Morrison?
What?
Space is cheap.
Space is cheap. Yeah, I think Jay said it.
Yeah, so
space is cheap.
That all those big open areas, yeah, that doesn't cost so much, but the actual 2x4 framing, and insulation, that's where it's hard to save a ton.
Right. You know, open floor plans in houses, that's the contractor getting away with not having to build walls, so it's cheaper for him.
So I want you guys to consider these price comparisons when you think about a tiny house. So first thing, tiny house real talk. The cost of your tiny house is going to vary greatly depending on size, materials used, and level of customization. As you can see, they come in all shapes and sizes, as you tiny fans probably already know. There's going to be a huge difference between a 16-footer and a 40-foot tiny house. Because even though space is cheap, trailers are not.
Right. Yes, it's like from a 16-foot trailer could cost you, you know, as little as $3,000, but like a huge, like 30-foot, or like our friends who have that 40-foot gooseneck, it's probably a $10,000 trailer.
Yeah, absolutely. In our tiny house build, we saved several $1,000s by using salvage materials. We got so fortunate is that we discovered or were given tips about incredible free materials that just required our labor, like tearing down panels from an old house that was getting ready to be torn down. It took a lot of our labor, which was free, and in the end, we had an added character, but once we ripped those boards down, that was just the beginning, right?
Oh yeah, totally. Then it has to be, then it's just a lot of hands have to be on, you know, on that stuff. So it's like sorting and cutting and fixing things. And like with our walls in our house, we had to cut the edges to make them flat. So that took a long time. And then, you know, putting them up and painting them and all that. So it takes time.
Fun fact, why you could save money with salvage as a DIYer, if you're asking a pro builder to use salvage, it actually might cost more money because that extra labor we just talked about, they're going to be doing and you're going to be paying for.
Yep.
Customization, especially with a pro builder, this can get pricey. The fancier, the more pimped out your tiny house is going to be.
Totally, you can pimp it out like crazy.
One cool thing is if you bought a less expensive, less customized tiny house, think about all the ways that you could customize it after you move in That's the great thing about tiny houses. When the structure is primarily built with wood or with traditional house materials, you can remodel. You can add and take away. There's all kinds of cool small space furniture now. So when I hear tiny houses are expensive, I'm always like, y'all, have you seen how expensive RVs are? Is the price, there's a huge price range, right, between used and new, depending on if it's a motor home or a travel trailer. But 10 to 300,000 grand is what you're looking at. We were considering for a little while building a custom camper, and $5,000 to build custom was barely enough to do like what, 10-foot, like canned ham style camper. But when we looked at, well, maybe we'll buy a used one and then renovate it. That we were still looking at starting at $5,000 at least for a used, beat up, needs to be completely gutted and redone. So I just share that to say that, you know, RVs can be very expensive. The nicer they are, the more pimped out they are, they're going to be more expensive. Mm-hmm. And the ones that are less expensive are going to be less suitable for year-round living.
Yes, absolutely. You can honestly buy like a pull behind, like a bumper pole camper that costs you $2,000. It also might be from 1984, and some of the things work, maybe all the things work, but it's definitely been really, really worn out, and could have problems like leaks and stuff that the person that sold it didn't even know about.
Right, and some RV parks won't accept older models.
That's totally true. I think the last one we went to, I think it was 95 was the oldest.
Wow.
RV that they took.
And when you get into some custom RVs or tiny houses, older ones can still look new. Mm-hmm. All right, another big comparison is I just looked up what is the median home value in 2019 across the country. Now, of course, we know house prices are going to vary a lot from like New York to North Carolina to Washington, etc. But $226,800 is the median value.
Whoa.
It's pretty high. It's pretty high. And the median rent, $1,700 a month. Now, of course, you might say, well, you're going to get some roommates and that can go down. But, if you're interested in tiny houses, part of that reason might be because you don't want a roommate. You want your own space. And that's where $1,700, you're going to be making a pretty good living to afford that. Mm-hmm. So kind of crazy. Okay, in 2019, the average new car cost based on Kelley Blue Book is $36,000.
Wow, that was the average? Wow.
That's the average new car. Now, most of us probably aren't going to buy a car right off the lot. And if you do, as soon as you leave the lot, that car value is going way down. That's just a reality. We're looking at getting a car right now, and we're looking at something in the like under $7,000 range, and that's like looking at, over 100,000 miles.
Oh, wait, yeah, at least.
All right, but what about tiny houses? A pro-build tiny house is going to start at $30,000, and that's normally going to be something much smaller, like an 18-footer, all the way up to $175,000 for large, super custom, super high-end, sustainable, sourced from the rainforest or something tiny house. DIY, it could be as cheap as $15,000, but you're going to have to be pretty scrappy like we were.
Yep.
Spend a lot of time collecting materials.
Yes, for sure. But I'm always about buying a brand new trailer, though. Just remember that.
It's true.
New trailer is your foundation. It is totally worth buying a new trailer.
And if you have a place to store materials and you have the time, you can really score some amazing stuff. But it's going to take you much longer to build. I think for a lot of DIYers that we've talked to and what I've seen reported online through various sites is 25 to 35 is probably what a lot of people are able to build their TAF for. And of course, that depends on size, right? So that's something to keep in mind. But so what do we see here already? We see that a tiny house is maybe more than a car, less than a high-end RV, and a fraction of the cost of a house. Now, I just want to give you some more comparison. There are 2 new beautiful tiny house on foundation communities being built right now, one in Georgia and one in Washington. And the house prices there are between, in Georgia, starting at $100,000, and that's at this new Clarkston, Georgia community, which we'll talk about here in a second. And the other one's in Oregon, and the house is at $250,000, which is more than the developer wanted to, but because of hookup fees and high cost of development, you know, what he wanted to be closer to 150 to 200 ended up being 250. But guess what? The median home price in Bend, Oregon, where that's being built, is $400,000. So it's still like half the price. So interesting point in comparison. Now, what is the benefit of living in a place like this? Well, like in the Georgia community, you're going to own that piece of land where your house is, and you're going to have the amenities of community, and you're close to town. You know, you're not having to worry about zoning. So it's pretty secure. So keep that in mind. You know, it's higher than a tiny house on wheels, but there are some trade-offs. So Micro Life Institute, and I'll put the link below, they just got their Clarkston, Georgia Cottages on Vaughn community approved. Pocket neighborhood. The houses are like 280 square feet up to like 550. And because the local community is super excited about this, they're working with them to keep some of the fees down, and that's why they're able to keep the home prices in an affordable range, which is like around $100,000, compared to the average house price there is $225,000. So it's less than half the cost, yes, and probably about half the amount of house. So it's a trade-off on space, but what do you get? What do you get? You can walk a block to downtown Clarkston, a block to the train, across the street's a park, and by the way, they're doing permaculture landscaping, so there's very little lawn mowing, and there's lots of food and flowers going to be grown, and you're going to get to know your neighbors. I mean, this is the goal that they're shooting for, but that's pretty incredible as far as quality of life, where you could be paying that high dollar amount and be living further away from town and not knowing, you know, and not getting to know your neighbors, which some people like, right?
True.
Some people like, I don't want to be this close to a neighbor. And this is the hiatus in Bend, Oregon. I'll put a link below. Right now they just have one house built, but this is kind of a rough rendering of. All right, so back to tiny houses on wheels. Back to the heart of the modern movement, right? So these are the prices that we talked about, average. Now let's compare this. Oh, I almost forgot. Even though this is the price of your house, it doesn't come with land. That's the big difference. So you're always going to be paying for parking, unless you buy your own land, and that's its whole other discussion. But parking could be free if you are able to do a work trade situation with the landowner, which we've done a number of times.
Quite a few times, yeah.
And that involved like shoveling snow, taking out trash, pet sitting. You know, we like pets, so that didn't seem like too much labor for us. Now, at some RV parks, especially in California, believe it or not, you could be paying $2,000 a month to stay there.
Yeah, that's God, that's so much money.
That is the exception, not the rule, but I wanted to be realistic.
Yeah.
But what's more common is $250 to $600 a month, and that includes a community setting or in a backyard. Here's our house. We are paying $300 a month with no work trade.
No work trade, yeah. And it is just as you see. There's actually a road right behind the house, so it's our thing is it's in town. We like that it's in town, so we don't really care about the yard and all that stuff. So we're in the house most of the time when we're working, or we're out walking at the river that's like a half a mile, quarter mile away from us.
And our amenities include Wi-Fi. That's included in the rent, power, water, and on-site laundry. Okay, so let's really look at this comparison: a TOW versus a mortgage versus our standard rent. Right, so if you pay $400 a month for parking, on an annual basis, that's $4,800. Well, compare that to paying $1,700 a month, over $20,000 for 1 year.
It's a lot.
Now, if you had a 30-year mortgage on our average home value, based on a certain this fixed interest rate you see here, you're coming to about $1,270 a month. Still not cheap. So that TOW parking is looking pretty good right now.
It's looking super good, yeah.
Now, if you got a family of 8, that tiny house, price might not be worth it.
No. Then you should put them all to work.
All right. So if we really look at a tiny house versus a 30-year mortgage, so 30 years at paying $400 a month, that's $144,000. And you add in, say you bought a $75,000 house, that still comes into less than the average American home in 2019, at $219,000.
Wow.
So question of the day here is, what do you think is a reasonable tiny house price? What would you be willing to pay? What would be worth it for you? And Christian, you brought an excellent point up earlier, was about depreciation.
Oh yeah, there's this thing. Yes, there's depreciation on everything, and with tiny houses, there aren't enough out there as of right now that we really know how much a tiny house actually depreciates, because it is a thing. As of right now, most of them are a thing like a car or a RV, so it's personal property.
Tiny house on wheels.
Tiny house on wheels. So, so most personal property devalues. So RVs, so if you buy a brand new one, just like a car, you drive it out a lot, and it just the price goes, the value goes down immediately. But with a tiny house, that hasn't been proven yet. So we've known people to have professional ones built, and they end up, for whatever reason, selling them in a year or two, and have gotten good money for them, or have gotten not so great money for them. So I think it really depends on, circumstances.
And I think a big factor there too is financing. There's still limited financing available. So some people are able to do owner financing. So they're, and that's going to make it better for the buyer. Because it's really hard just to come up with $75,000 or $50,000.
Yeah.
But
and we do have a friend that's selling one for how much? Is it 75?
Oh, Nerds Gone Tiny on Instagram, which is now Nerds Gone Chic. I'll put a link below. They're selling their 40-footer right now, and I believe,
I can't remember.
150,000.
Was it that? No, was it that much?
I can't
remember. I thought it was like 75,000, but.
If you're looking for a house, ask them. Maybe they'll do owner financing.
Yeah, we'll put the link and the price below.
But I think a big thing, that we were talking about earlier is, even though we don't have a lot of data on tiny houses on wheels, because they're built with more durable materials like a traditional house, it's going to, I think, hold its value better than an RV.
Yeah, because it wears different. The thick walls are going to have the good insulation. The countertops, they're not laminate. That sometimes it's made of that press board, and if the water gets in there, it just goes. That's not good. So most of the time, like our house, it's a real wood countertop. So if it looks messed up, you sand it down and reseal it, and it's brand spanking new.
Right. Or some people even do like marble countertops, believe it or not, in a tiny house.
Yeah, we've seen them.
I mean, you could do whatever you want, but the point is, most folks are using these higher end materials, and it's not to put down RVs, it's just to give you that perspective. Is in 15 years, an RV is considered old.
Yeah, 15. That's it. Yeah, and like somebody said, some of them in RV parks can't be 10 years old and be in an RV park. So
it's just a lot of things to keep in mind. But I think overall, what this conversation shows me, or reinforced to me, is a tiny house is more affordable. That doesn't mean it's cheap,
Yeah.
Definitely not. And financing is limited, but more and more options are becoming available. And I think over the next 5 years, that's going to just explode. So hang in there.
Yeah.
But I want to hear from you guys. What do you think? What's reasonable to you? What would be affordable for you? So thank you guys for stopping by. We hope you got something out of this.
Yeah, we appreciate it. And don't forget, if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe. And ring that little bell in the corner, because that will let you know when we're doing another live. It'll send you a little announcement.
Yep, and tune in Thursday at 3:30. We're coming at you with a brand new tour of a very special tiny house community in Arizona. We're excited to share, and we'll see you then.
Yeah, take it easy. And I didn't cut my hair, see? Somebody was asking.
Nope.
Bye.
Bye.